So guys, I just want to hop on here real quick and just introduce Bob and Ronald. They're from Navy Mutual. I know this is a question we get a lot from our veterans as far as, what to do as far as planning for the future. Now that a lot of us are out of the military, what do we do with our TSP so that we can keep growing those accounts and be prepared for the future? So, Bob, whenever you're ready, go ahead and with your presentation.
Okay, I will. Okay, well, and I'll pick up on TSP. That's the first part of the slides that we're going to talk about is Thrift Savings Plan. So first off, I'd like to thank you for the invite. As you can see on this screen here, I am a retired Marine and I work for a company. I got my job in the retirement class that I took at Quantico, Virginia. I was sharing earlier that I was the last active duty Marine on the Marine Corps Marathon staff. So I had a Marine Corps Marathon staff polo shirt in my transition class. And there was a retired colonel giving a financial brief, survivor benefit plan brief during a transition class that I took. And he wanted to run the marathon and we were already sold out. And he asked me if I could get him a number and I asked him if he could get me a job. And unbeknownst to me at the time, that was that 30-second elevator speech that later in the week they told us to get ready to have. So we exchanged business cards. I got him a race number, obviously. And the following year, when I went ready to retire, I sent him an email and asked him if he could help me out in the transition process and helping me find a job. Figure you got a retired Marine colonel in the DC area. Thought he would be pretty well connected. Next thing you know, he says, send me your resume. I sent him my resume and, a week and a half later, I had a job. So, and now I have been with them since I retired. I am the Navy Mutual Aid senior presenter. As such, all those designations, all those initials at the end of my name are different financial designations that I have through an organization called The American College. They're the premier financial education organization. One of them I really want to point out is the REBC, and it's a registered employee benefit consultant. And that financial designation there really gave me a lot of knowledge when it comes to that I learned that I get to share with our service members as they're transitioning. And we're going to talk about a couple of those things, like when we talk about vesting and other things with 401ks and stuff. So, I mean, it was very beneficial. It was very educational for me to get that along with the other financial designations. So that's a little bit of my story. None of us is born knowing how to save and invest, and we'll talk the difference between those two words. Very few of us stumble into financial security, inherit it from our parents or grandparents or something like that. Most of us do it on our own. Although money doesn't grow on trees, it definitely does grow. When Albert Einstein, one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein is, compound interest is the 8th greatest wonder of the world. Or another quote of his, compound interest is compound interest in time. Again, it's the 8th greatest wonder in the world. Best, it's just out there. I was very fortunate when I joined the Marine Corps in that I had a master gunny when I was a young private. I had a master gunny, a senior E9, who was, I think, very ahead of his time, but he forced me because, I'm a little bit older than most of you in this room. And he forced me to put money away every payday. He would drive me to the credit union and make me get money orders and then drive me to the post office and make me put them in an envelope and mail them in. This is before, we do everything on the internet. This is before that time. So when you hear these stories, can you be a millionaire? The answer is yes. The better question to ask is, not can I be a millionaire, but the question is, do you want to be a millionaire? And for my younger guys in the room, and I'm talking mid-20s plus or minus, that it's not a millionaire for you guys because inflation, right now, you guys in your early 20s, mid-20s, thanks to inflation, $1 million today, when you go to retire in 40 years, is only going to have the spending value of about $270,000. Yeah. So I want you to keep that in mind. So being a millionaire today, you just got to think about those things. So that's the question you got to ask yourself is not can you, but do you want to be a millionaire? And if you do want to be a millionaire, then there's so many different avenues that you can do, that you can use to get there. We're going to talk about a few of them today. TSP, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, investing on your own, those kind of things. But there are a lot of other avenues to get there. And we can save that hopefully for another meeting. Or presentation if we want to get into other ways. So I was blessed. So I can just say then that, we can look at all the various resources that are available to all of us today that can kind of replace that master gunny that sat me down and made me do this every payday. I mean, Ron Shilling has heard this story before. Every payday for 9 months, this master gunny drove me to the credit union, and then drove me to the post office to make me do what I had to do. And then he would take me to the bowling alley at MCS Cherry Point. He would take me to the bowling alley and he would buy me cheeseburger and French fries. And I think to this day, my favorite meal is cheeseburger and French fries or onion rings. And I think that's why, because of what he did for me, but he set me up for the rest of my life. And just to give you an idea, my first monthly base pay was only $494 a month. So, that was a little bit less than what some of you guys were making. So it's there. So let me go to the next slide, make sure this works right. So that's where we're coming from. And that's a little bit of me. And let me see how I get this to move to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Real quick, this is who Navy Mutual Aid is. That we've been around since 1879. That's about the first thing and about the only thing I'll say about Navy Mutual Aid. Well, let me hit two of them real quick. We've been around since 1879. Longevity is a big thing right now in the marketing world. That's why you hear Geico and now USAA making those commercials saying we've been around for 75 plus years. Well, we've been around for 140 plus years. If you ever had the pleasure to come into the Washington, D.C. area, Navy Mutual Aid is actually located aboard a military installation, Joint Base Fort Myer Henderson Hall. If you look out my office windows, it overlooks Arlington Cemetery. That's us in a nutshell. We were the first VSO to the VA also, and I'm sure you guys know what a VSO is, but we were the first VSO to the VA. And the last thing, we are approved educators from the Sea Service side, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Public Health Service. We're the approved financial educators. So much so that in 1972, when SBP was being written first in the military side of the house and at the armed forces level, at the Pentagon level, and then later going to Congress to get approved and signed into Title 10 of the U.S. Code. But when Survivor Benefit Plan was being written into law, the Navy came to Navy Mutual Aid and said, hey, will you be our financial educator for Survivor Benefit Plan and other financial topics? And since then, we have been the approved educators. So that's our story, our short story in a nutshell. I'm not here, I have nothing to do with it, but how actually Navy Mutual Aid makes money is we sell life insurance and annuities. I have nothing and I can do nothing about it with any of that. I am, and Ron is the other one in the association. We have nothing to do with it. We're the educators, but that's who we are and that's how we make money. So, and here's some links if you want to get out to us. The biggest one, if you want anything from us, is to use our mobile app. That is mine and Ron's. It's strictly education. I can't stop you from going to our website, but our mobile app is only education. It comes out of the education budget. And we have a lot of stuff that we keep updating and putting out there. I already started to kind of respond to this bullet here that every story does have a beginning. I just told you mine. But the big thing you want to start thinking about, I know you guys are in college. I don't know where at in the college realm you're at, whether you're getting ready to graduate, whether you're just starting and all that. But the biggest thing to do is look and see where you're at. Where do you want to be? And then where are you at now? And then where do you want to be? And I have in there, you pick some time increments. You know, if you're in your early 20s or mid 20s, like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I want to fill in the blank. And we're talking financial goals. You can do this for other goals too, but I'm strictly referring to financial goals. You know, by the time I turn 30 or 35 or 40, you know, do it whatever time increments you want. And this way, you know, to have that ultimate goal, I want to have $2.5 million in my 401k or my investment account when I retire. It won't seem so, wow, that's overwhelming. You know, if you set it up, well, hey, in 5 years, if I do my math right, if I do my stuff right, in 5 years, I want to be, and then you fill in the blank. I want to have, you know, 15,000 or 30,000 in my 401k or even more, you know, whatever it is you want to have. So you pick it. I'm very fond of saying that this is your life. You know, it's nobody else's. You're the one. So you look yourself in the mirror. And if you're married, you sit down with your spouse and you have this conversation with them. But you're the one. You're the one. You look in the mirror and say, "You're the one I'm going to spend the rest of my life with." I don't need to compete or compare myself to anybody else. You know, the keeping up with the Joneses kind of ritual. And the other thing with this is to keep the fun and fundamentals. I am not the person that's going to tell you to give up that $2.80 or whatever a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks cost or wherever you do that. I am not that kind of guy. Okay. I think there's other ways to find money. If that's your enjoyment, then enjoy it. Okay. I like to drink beer. And I'm not going to give up drinking beer to make money or to put more money away. What I will tell you to do is for all of us, and this is why I say this is your life, for all of us, we look and say, okay, where am I spending my money at? And then you set up a simple spending plan or a financial plan. Since we're talking long-range investing, let's call it a financial plan. In a nutshell, a financial plan is a budget. But you look at this and say, okay, where am I at right now? Where do I want to be? What do you want to give up, or what small changes in your life do you want to make in order for you to get where you want to get to? And that's what a lot of this comes down to. And that's why I tell you, I'm not going to tell you to stop drinking that coffee, or for me, going and buying that beer, going out and buying a six-pack. I like Bud Light, so I'm not going to stop drinking Bud Light or Corona Light, just to put money away. No, I'll save on other things. And that's where the setting up a spending plan, seeing where you're spending your money at, and then you can tweak what you want to not spend money on or spend less money on to be able to put this money away if you need to find some money. The difference between saving and investing is something you just really need to understand, and it's quite simple. Saving is the money, putting away some of the money that your money's making right now. You're taking some of your income and putting some of that away. It's money you make that you don't spend, money you're putting into a savings account or a money market account or CDs for your emergency savings account and your regular savings. Investing, on the other hand, is money you want to grow, money you want to have, like your best part-time job is money making money for you. Your money making money for you. Investing, you try to make the money you earn grow, which, by the way, we bring in risk. So there's a greater chance of losing your money, but a greater opportunity to earn a lot more. So that's what that is. So we're going to start with TSP. If I can get my slides to work right. Yeah. Okay. Let's start with TSP. Because right before the class started, that's what I heard, that there was a lot of interest in Thrift savings plan. Hopefully you opened one, and hopefully, more importantly, you kept your Thrift savings plan when you separated out of the service, separated or retired out of the service. There's a couple good things about TSP. The benefits you can see right there, the low, I'm going to put low, lowest fees, and we're going to talk about fees in the next couple slides. But TSP has probably the lowest expense fees out there when you start looking at 401ks and other types of qualified IRS retirement accounts. The fees right now are 40 cents a year per $1,000. Where if you go and you Google what the average 401k expense fee, depending on what article you read or what site you go to, you'll hear anything from $1.01, $1.51, upwards to $3. And I'll explain those numbers here in a little bit. So you want to think about that. Now, what can you do with your TSP now since you're out of the service? Well, for one, if you have no intentions of going back into either government service or back into the military, you still can keep your thrift savings plan account for the rest of your life. That is your account that you can keep for the rest of your life. I like to think of it as your main retirement account. And then when I say that, I mean that that's your main retirement account. And then you have, when you start working, you have your current retirement account, wherever you're working at. And the reason I call that your main retirement account, because again, you can keep it for the rest of your life. Now, what can you do with your account since you are no longer a current federal employee, active duty service member? Well, you can't personally put money into it right now. However, you can make qualified rollovers to your thrift savings plan. And what I mean by that is, or what that means is, a qualified IRS rollover is if you have a traditional IRA, if you open one of those up, you can roll that into your TSP account. If you leave, or when you graduate from Fordham and you get out into the civilian workforce, if you have a 401k or a 403b at your next employer, and then you should leave that employment and go to work somewhere else, when you leave that employment, you have a 401k that you're no longer participating with, you can roll that into your TSP account. That's what's called a qualified IRS rollover. Is if you have something that's yours and you're no longer participating into it, you can roll that into your TSP account. So again, for those of you who kept your TSP account, that's a good thing, because over the course of your adulthood, if you do change jobs, again, you look at the expense fees, you can roll your those 401ks or 457s, 403bs, whatever you have, into your TSP account. And then the same thing for when you go into retirement. You get ready to go into retirement. We'll pick a retirement age of 60. You get ready to go into retirement at the age of 60, and you have your 401k from the company you've been working with for however long. One of the things you look at is, okay, what are my fees am I paying with this 401k compared to my TSP fees? Maybe I can take some, if not all, of my 401k from my last job I'm working at and roll it into my TSP account, and then have that sitting in there for another 20, 25 years, 30 years, however long you live into retirement. And then you have the TSP retirement options, which are very similar. I think most of them are better than most of the 401k retirement options for how you're going to withdraw that money out, as far as, purchasing an annuity or doing monthly amounts, monthly percentages, or anything along those lines. But most of you are going to be in the working force for the next 10, 20, 30 years, so we won't talk about that right now. But just know the settlement options with Thrift Savings Plan are really, really good. They just changed a lot of them last year with the TSP Modernization Act. So now, over the next couple decades, while you're out in the civilian workforce or whatever workforce, what can you do with your TSP account? Well, you can do what's called inter-fund transfers. We call it asset allocation or reallocation. As you get a little bit older, if you want to take some of your money, say, out of the stock funds, the CDS and the I funds, and move them into the bond fund or the government securities fund, you can do that. Yeah, or you can do that at any time, or if you want, whatever you want to do. If you're paying attention to the funds, and say the S fund or the I fund has an exceptionally good quarter or an exceptionally good year, and you want to take some of that proceeds or profits or whatever and put it in something a little bit relatively safe, like maybe the C fund or the F fund or the G fund, you can do that. Twice a month, you can go into your TSP account and reallocate money, move money around, whatever word you want to use. Twice a month, you can do that. And there's no fees for that. So that's pretty good. Now, along with that, the other thing you can do is, however many times you want in a given month, you can always move money to the G fund as many times as you want. But twice a month, you can move money to other funds if you should want to do that. So diversification, that's something I'm going to talk about over the next couple slides also, because you have your TSP account, And then we have the 5 funds, and I'm going to explain those, and then we'll go on to the next slide. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is if you're going to keep your TSP account and you have money in any of these accounts, I want you to keep that in mind when, as far as diversification goes, when you are putting money anywhere else for retirement. If you're doing it in your own Roth IRA, or you're doing it in your next company's 401k, or I'm going to bring in a spouse. For those of you who are married or will be getting married sometime in the future, I want you to keep diversification in mind. Understand where your money's at in your TSP. And when you get your 401k at your next employer, and they give you they say, okay, here's our 401k, it's with the principal. Then the principal, sends you a package and say, okay, here's all your different investment options. Well, you already know that, say you have money in the C fund, then, okay, I already have money in the S&P 500. Do I want to continue to put money in the S&P 500 fund in my new 401k, or do I want to be a little bit more diversified, and I have my S&P 500 money with TSP? So let me put, the average 401k has 14 different investment options. So do I want to put money, allocate some of my 401k contributions to the other different investment accounts that they have, knowing I'm diversified because, pretty diversified because I already have money in like the S&P 500 through my TSP. So let me go and put money in like the Dow Jones, or a real estate investment trust, an REIT, or let me put one in the Russell 3000, or maybe the S&P's. There's an S&P 600, which are 600 small and mid-cap size companies, along with the S&P 500. So just I would tell you that when you start your next, unless you're already working, but when you go to your next employer, take some time to look and see what their investment plans are, and then balance them against the funds in TSP. So let me explain TSP funds right now. The first fund we have, the G fund, is the government securities fund. It's made up of 125 different government securities, 6-month treasury bills, 18-month treasury notes, 24-month treasury bonds, those types of things. And again, there's 125 different of those government securities, a lot of each of those 125 in the G fund. The whole purpose of the G fund is to have a very, very safe place for your money. And it's ideally it's supposed to just maintain or stay up with inflation. Sometimes it does that, sometimes it doesn't. So, but that's the whole goal, is just to keep up with inflation. There's not a chance to make a lot of money in the G fund. You're just going to keep up with, we'll just say, purchasing power with inflation. The F fund is a bond fund. You can actually go out and you can look at the bond fund if you wanted to, but it's a bond fund. And right now it has roughly 3,800 bonds in it. It's an index fund based on a company called Barclays. You can go to barclays.com. They're an international investment firm. But if you went to barclays.com and went to their search bar and typed in the words Capital U.S. Aggregate Bond Fund, that bond fund that Barclays has, our F fund is a mirror image of that bond fund. Whatever Barclays does or did with that bond fund today at 1,500, the F fund manager will mimic that. And that's the whole idea behind an index, is they mimic whatever the index is based on. They just mimic that. So that's what our F fund is. It's based on Barclays Capital U.S. Aggregate Bond Fund. Our C fund mimics the S&P 500. For the most part, the S&P 500 just rolls along every day. Yeah, it goes up, it goes down based on the market, but very seldom are there changes. But it just had a recent shakeup. Forgive me, I don't remember the companies that changed on it, but there was just 2 companies that one got bought out by another company, and so they took that one. They obviously had to merge into the other one, and they put another company on there. And forgive me for not remembering, it happened a couple weeks ago. But for the most part, the S&P 500 is 500 of not the, but 500 of the largest companies in the United States. Our S fund is another index. It's based on an index now called the Dow Jones Completion Index. It has nothing to do with the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but it's Dow Jones owns both of those indexes. So it's called the Dow Jones Completion Index. And what it's supposed to complete is, if you take the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Completion Index, you have ownership in every publicly traded company on the New York and American Stock Exchange. So the S fund is literally the small and mid-cap companies that are traded daily on the New York and American Stock Exchange. So between the C fund and the S fund, you've got ownership in every publicly traded company on the New York and American Stock Exchange. So you go back up to the bullet above that for diversification, you are pretty diversified between the C and the S fund. And this is where I would encourage you to know this and then pay attention to this. So if you're going to do something else on your own through traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, or individual investings, which we'll get to, or when you get your next job with your 401ks or whatever retirement plan your company's offering you, this is where you make sure, okay, hey, we've got the S&P 500 down. I've got this index down. Let me see what else they're offering me over here, as far as my investment options. And then you can maybe, look at that for diversification purposes. Does the 401k, are they offering me say a NASDAQ index or a Russell 3000 index or a Dow Jones index or something like that, so you can be diversified. The I fund is an index fund. The index fund, it is an index fund. I'm sorry, I'm looking at I going index. The I fund is the international fund. The I fund right now is based on a company called Morgan, is based on an index from a Morgan Stanley. I understand I have a question. I cannot see it. I'm on a full screen. If someone can unmute and tell me what the question is. Or Ron, if you can read it.
Yeah, I'm answering them. I'm typing as they're going as well, Bob.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't. I have a full screen of my PowerPoint, and I can see people on the right-hand side, but I can't see questions. So I apologize. The I fund is based on another index. It's through Morgan Stanley. So if you went to morganstanley.com, you could literally see, or if you go in their word search or their search bar and you typed in EAFE, it's an acronym. It stands for Europe, Australia, Far East. That is that's the index that our I fund is currently based on. And I say currently because they got permission from Congress to change the investment mix, and they're going to actually stick with Morgan Stanley, and they're going to follow a different fund through Morgan Stanley called the AW fund, the All World Fund. So that's supposed to be migrating. That money's supposed to be migrating over as we speak over this first 6 months of the year. I haven't really been keeping track of it. I should for my job, but I'm not. Well, I was going to say I'm not a fan of the I fund, but I don't want to persuade anybody. But yeah, it's based on, we'll just say the AW fund now, the All World Fund through Morgan Stanley, and that's a good thing because one, the historical return compared to the EAFE and the AW fund has done better over the course of history, but the AW fund is investing in a lot more countries outside the United States. The former I fund, the EAFE fund, believe it or not, only invested in 21 countries outside the United States, and they only had 925 stocks in their portfolio. The new AW fund has thousands of different stocks, companies in their portfolio, and they invest in a whole lot more different countries outside the U.S. The I fund, the current I fund, the one that's coming to be, the AW fund, actually invests in our neighbors to the north up in Canada. The old one, the EAFE fund, has no money invested in Canada and the stock market in Canada because they're not part of, obviously, Europe, Australia, or Far East. So it's just a couple of small little things with TSP. If I don't have any questions about TSP, I'll move on and start talking about some other things. I talked about fees. That's one of the things I would tell you to pay attention to when you go to, if you want to do any type of investing, is to pay attention to fees. I like to say that fees, along with inflation, are the silent killer. I was going to make a military joke, but I didn't know if anyone would get offended if I used, when he's looking at 1, 2, and 3. That's why I went 1, 2, and 3 instead of a Navy, a sailor, a Marine, and an airman walking through a bar. So I just did 1, 2, and 3. But I put these numbers up here. I want you to look at the impact of fees. Okay. Age 35, I took simple numbers. You got a 35-year-old, 3 people that are 35 years of age. They have $100,000, and they invest in an account. And all of them, all 3 accounts, earn 8%. Fast forward 30 years, when they go to turn 65, you look at the difference between a 1%, a 2%, and a 3% in fees. Look at the difference in that return that those 3 accounts have. You go from that 1% fee, that individual will have $761,000. The individual who had a 2% fee, they'll only have $574,000. And the individual that has a 3% fee will have only $432,000. So fees really do matter. And I go back to TSP, and one of the nice things about TSP is the very, very low expense fee. TSP's fee is actually less than half of that 1% fee. Now, what does that mean to you? Or what should it mean to you? And what should you think about when you're going somewhere to get a job? Number one, well, you look and see what the fees are. By law, they have to be very blatant. They have to be very public about their fees. They have to be stated, as that bullet says, the administrative fees, the investment fees, the asset and revenue sharing fees, or they just might want to give you one blanket fee, but these are the different types of fees that are in there. The audit and counseling fees is a big one, the investment fees, and then the administrative fees. These fees vary based on the size of the company that you're going to go to work for, whether you have a small company that has, say, less than 100, maybe 100, 150 people, to you go to work for a big company that has thousands of employees. Well, obviously, a company that has thousands of employees, to share the cost of the plan would be a lot cheaper because there's thousands of people to share that fee with, as opposed to a smaller company that only has 100 employees paying, pretty much maybe the same amount of fees going there. Plus the plan provider. I mean, you could go to work for a company and they could be using some of the big names like Fidelity or Principal, or you could go to work for a company that might be using a smaller company, like SunTrust, or, and I mean, no, I'm not being condescending whatsoever to any company. I'm not picking on anybody or saying anyone is better than the other one. But I was talking to some people and I know, and their employer, their 401k is through SunTrust Bank, or SunTrust, the investment side of the house through SunTrust. And it's like, okay. And we were looking at the fees, and they were a little bit more because, it's because of that provider. So you just got to look at that. And the other thing to look for when it comes to fees, or what matters when it comes to how much you're going to be paying in fees, is how much money how much money is under management, both in your company's plan and then the company as a whole. And that really has a lot to do with it, how much you're paying or how much money is invested, say, through your company's 401k or whatever. And then what and how many different investment options, sub-accounts that they're going to offer you. I can tell you from my personal experience here that we have, how many we have at Made Mutual Aid. You look at that and, I can look at that and say, okay, well, I know the principal who our 401k is with has a lot more investment options out there, but we're limited to, fill in the blank, say 12 different investment options. So this is where the fees come in, and how these fees are derived is a lot of these. And then, believe it or not, to add in a Roth 401k or a Roth side of the house, that's more in fees because it goes, it's a totally separate plan than the traditional side of the house, the tax deferred side of the house. So it's all these little things that add up to charge all the fees. One thing I would tell you to think about when you're thinking about fees is, again, you're looking at your TSP account, you're looking at the fees in your account that your 401k has. So let me think back. I'm 2 steps ahead of myself. when you're looking at the fees, my bottom bullet, my bottom comment down here, you don't want to compromise your investment goals or risk tolerance and everything else to score lower fees. Lower fees should just be one criterion. You look at some of the other things. Let's look at matching first. Matching in a 401k for your next employer, a matching is what is the company going to give me? What are they going to match me? You know, if I'm going to put in 5% of my pay into my 401k, how much is my employer going to give me? Benefits attract and benefits retain employees. So, and matching is one of those big ones, is how much are they going to match? I can tell you, I have a friend who works for Southwest Airlines. Southwest matches 9.5% in that 401k. So that's one of those things you look at. And then you compare the fees. Okay. It's like, okay, are they matching me? If they're only going to match me 3% and the fees are a little bit higher, well, then of course I'll take advantage of the 3% match, because you don't want to give away free money. So I'll take advantage of the 3% match. But instead of putting more of my money in my 401k, let me look and see what my spouse's 401k or whatever, if you have a spouse, let me see what my 401k fees are with my spouse, see what those are, and see if we can maybe put more money from our spouse's 401k into their account, and not put so much in ours, but take advantage of the matching. Or should I open up something up on my own, a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA on my own based on fees? So I'm not getting too deep, am I? I hope I'm not. I'm trying to think broad range, because you saw the difference in fees, you know, long range down the road. So look at those things. And the other thing I would tell you to think about with matching is the word vesting. Vesting is really important. One of the things especially when you're interviewing for jobs, maybe not on the first interview, but on that follow-up interview, or, you know, after the interview's over with, you know, you can talk to, you know, the recruiter or whoever you're interviewing with, or the HR persons, and you can ask them, it's like, you say you have a 401k and you do matching of 5%, or, yeah, we'll just stick with 5%. Well, when is that 5% money, when I get paid, if I get paid every other Friday, when is that 5% match that you're giving me my money? That's called vesting. When is the money you're matching me my money? Now, some companies, and again, all companies are different. So you just take this into account, and you think about this could have, this could or could not be a big deal to you. You could be looking at a job and saying, yeah, I want to stay with this company for a long time, or I'm just taking this job until fill in the blank. My soon-to-be spouse finishes up, graduate school, you know, finishes their degree, and we move 6 months or a year down the road. So you look at what vesting is. Some companies will say, hey, you're automatically invested. So on payday, when you put in your 5% and we match you 5%, that money is yours Friday night, automatic. Other companies are going to say, no, we have what's called elevator vesting or escalator vesting. Oh, what's that mean? Well, that means if you work for us for a year, then 25% of the money we match is yours. If you're with us for 2 years, then 50% of the money we match is yours. 3 years, 75%, 4 years, 100%. Companies could be different on that escalator matching vesting scale. And that's one of those things you just check with the company, and then you make sure that fits into your goals. Or you just understand, okay, look, I'm going to get this money, but if I leave within a year or whatever, they're going to take out or take back all the money they matched. And they will. There's also something called cliff vesting. Cliff vesting, obviously, if you can imagine a cliff, you're falling off, but in this way, you're falling up. And all that means is there's a date, a drop dead date. If you stay with us for fill in the blank 1 year, then everything that we've matched you till then and henceforward is yours. If you leave employment within the first year, then we're going to take back all the money we matched. So understand the matching and understand the vesting. And then, of course, I brought back diversification because you want to look and see what the company plans are, and see what investment sub-accounts they're offering, and then compare that to where your money's at in TSP and other places, so you can be well diversified. So I'm hoping all this makes sense. Now, a lot of things, I mean, just to give you an idea, I mentioned rather quickly that I don't like the I fund in TSP. Well, the C fund, which is the S&P 500, and I'm just going to throw numbers out at you, and I'm just telling you this, just something to think about. 31% of the money the C fund makes comes from international accounts. I'll go back to think about Coca-Cola. We buy Coca-Cola here in the United States, and there's Coca-Cola in Egypt, there's Coca-Cola in Europe, there's Coca-Cola in Israel, there's Coca-Cola in Japan. 31% of the money that's made in the C fund out of the S&P 500 comes from international money. And then the top 100 companies in the S&P 500 are obviously, or it's not obviously, but the top 100 companies in the S&P 500 are also in the NASDAQ. So there's a lot of commingling going on here, but and I don't want to get too deep into it, but I just want you to understand the importance of diversification. There's roughly 3,900 companies or 3,700 companies, I'm sorry, in the NASDAQ, if they have an index that follows the NASDAQ, or if you're going to do that on your own. So, okay, I hope we're doing good so far. Hey, real quick, I just want to, I know there's not really no interaction back and forth, but I was reading an article the other day, and it just, and it was they asked a fill in the blank question, and oddly enough, I got 0 out of 5 answers correct, and I thought I knew this stuff. But they said, they asked, what were the top 5 best stocks in the first 20 years in 2000, from 2000 to 2020, or December 31st of 2019, the top 5 producing stocks in the stock, 5 top producing companies. I didn't get any of them right. And the point of the article was, yeah, you can look at history, because here's the top 5 producing stocks of the past 20 years since 2000, but are they going to maintain that because you think of what's going on during the times? I'll give them to you real quick in case you're curious. Monster Beverage was the top one, Tractor Supply, Old Dominion, Holly Frontier, which is an oil corporation, and then Altria Group, which used to be Philip Morris, which was cigarettes and stuff like that. That just blew my mind when I looked at that. So a little bit of trivia too, a little bit of breaking it up and keeping it interesting. Here we go. Employer provided plans for 2020. If you're going to get a job this year, or if you're working right now, the most you can put in there right now is $19,500. And that's if you're doing, and that's from you. That has nothing to do with the match from your employer. That's how much you can put into your retirement accounts. Now, your employer, between you and your employer, the max you can put in there is $57,000. And that goes with the match that the employer is going to provide. And those are the IRS limits. So there's nothing that can be done about those. Well, that was just a quick slide that we get to go through. I just want to keep up with my notes here, see if I'm forgetting anything. I had that there. I put that up for a couple reasons. Let me see if I missed anything on this real quick. On that. No, I think we're good. So a little bit of history on there about why the IRS has those limits, and I'm going to tell you what they are right now, just so you know. The IRS limits, because a lot of people would, it's like, man, I could put more than $19,500 in there this year, and especially if you get a higher paying job. But the reason they did that, go back to when 401ks started to become more prominent in the United States, when a lot of companies started doing away with defined benefit plans. The IRS limits were there to prevent highly paid workers from benefiting a lot more by putting money away in these tax deferred accounts than the average Joe citizen. And then the limit on the total amount, that $57,000, was to keep things, again, fair for the average employee compared to the highly compensated employees. So that was the IRS. And if you think about it, the IRS looking out for the average Joe. There is what's called non-discrimination testing out there, and it's done at every company. There's a equation that has to be that's performed every month, actually, for how much money highly compensated employees, and the IRS calls a highly compensated employee somebody who makes $120,000 or more, and they look at how much employees in a company that make more than 120,000 a year, how much they're contributing, and there's a ratio for how much they're contributing to how much the employees who aren't making $120,000 or more a year is, and there has to be there's a number that has to be there, a percentage, and if that percentage is ever not kept, then that company gets a fine from the IRS because they exceeded the non-discrimination rules. So there's a fine line that's really watched at employees for this, and that's really where these contribution limits come in and the whole purpose behind them. I hope I don't bore you with a little bit of history and what all these are for, but sometimes when you're looking at these numbers, that when you understand that the reason behind them, they really start to make sense. So, okay. Any other questions about 401ks, 403bs, any of those TSP? We're good on there. Let's move on to something then a little bit more, something I like to do, talk about a lot, something we can do on our own. IRAs, and we'll talk traditional Roth, mutual funds, ETFs, or doing buying and selling individually. Let me make sure I didn't put this. Okay. IRAs, you have two basic types of IRAs. IRA stands for individual retirement account, and that's something you can do on your own as long as you have income. If you're married, if your spouse has income coming in and you don't, then you can still do this. You can open up an IRA, again, traditional and or Roth. You can have as many as you want if you want, but the most you can contribute in a given year, January 1st to December 31st, is $6,000. And if you're married, you can open one on you and on your spouse, and then collectively you can put in $12,000, $6,000 on each. Now, if you remember back a couple slides, we were talking about 401k fees. I know people that they work for companies, their 401k fees are pretty high. So they do their matching, they're taking advantage of the company match, but then they have opened up IRAs on their own, Roth IRAs on their own, and they're also funding Roth IRAs because you can find a lot of IRAs out there now. And again, I'm not recommending any company, but you can go out through Vanguard or Fidelity, and their funds, their Roth IRAs or traditional IRAs are really, the expense fees are really, really low. But go out and do your research. You can pick any company, but those two are known for really low fees. So you can look at that. And again, I know people, because of the fees they're paying in their 401k, have actually, hey, I'll take advantage of the match, but then some of my other money is going to be directed out here to my IRA because of the fees, and for investment options too. A traditional IRA is, you get what's called a below the line, when you do your taxes, below the line tax deduction. If you have a 401k or even traditional TSP, that comes out before you even get taxed. So it grows tax deferred. Traditional IRAs, you get your paycheck, take your disposable income, put money in traditional IRA, and then when you do your taxes, you get what's called a below the line deduction for tax purposes. Traditional IRAs or tax deferred, which means you don't pay taxes on that money until you take that money out. Roth IRAs, you put that money in your own Roth IRA after you pay taxes on it, because you put it in there with your disposable income. And since you already paid taxes on that money will never, ever again be taxed. That money is not taxed, the money you invested, nor is the money your money makes taxed ever again. So one of the things you keep in mind, and again, you balance this with, again, if you have a spouse and their retirement accounts, you balance that with your investments. And if you happen to have a defined benefit plan, a retirement account through a military retirement check, like I have, or if you're going to go back into the military or maybe go to work for the federal government, you look at defined benefit plans or pensions, because pensions are taxable income. So if you know you're going to have a pension later in life, and you can kind of figure out what your pension is going to be, you put money in tax deferred accounts, you're going to be paying taxes on that money, obviously, because it's tax deferred, but you're going to be paying taxes on that on top of your pension, which is taxable income also. So this is where you start looking long range down the road. Some of the decisions you guys are making or you're going to make in your 20s and your 30s will impact you for decades when it comes to taxes. So understand the difference between traditional, tax deferred, and then Roth. And then sit down and have that meeting with yourself or your spouse and say, okay, where are we at? Where do we want to be? Hey, this is taxable income. I'm going to be with this company, or you have a pension with your company. So we're going to have, $6,000 a month coming in from your pension. So, that's taxable income. A Roth might be a better thing to do now, because then when we take that money out, we're not paying taxes on that, along with, on top of all the other taxable income. So just little things to think about. Mutual funds you can open up now on your own. Unlike an IRA, which is an IRS approved retirement account, individual retirement account, unlike those, mutual funds have no limits on how much money you invest in those, because there's no, I'm going to say tax break or tax incentive on those, because it's an investment vehicle and not a retirement account. So you can put money in mutual funds on your own. And again, some people look at mutual funds for, say, those shorter term goals. They look at, hey, when I turn 40, 45 or whatever, we got to start thinking about, our daughter or daughter's marriage, weddings we got to pay for, or when we get to this age, maybe we want to go and buy the big, the lake property or whatever you want to do. Mutual funds are a good medium range tool, investment vehicle to look at for having that money many years down the road. Or maybe they want to buy the dad's family business or something. There's a lot of different uses of mutual funds. Exchange traded ETFs or exchange traded funds. I like to say those are the modern day version of mutual funds. The big difference between a mutual fund and an exchange traded fund is this. Exchange traded funds are actively managed, which means right now, I don't know what time it is right now, but right now, if you wanted to make a move, if you wanted to buy or sell, if you had money in an ETF, if you wanted to buy or sell in that ETF, it is done as soon as you hit the submit button. I mean, it's done right then and there. It's traded or it's bought or sold right then and there on the floor. Mutual funds, on the other hand, just like our TSP account, and 401ks, they don't do anything. If you got up if you went out on your account at 9 o'clock this morning, nothing, and you said, hey, I want to sell or I want to buy, I want to do something different on your mutual funds or even TSP, nothing is done, even though you said to do it, nothing is done until the close of business. And if you do it later in the day, and you have to look on your funds to see what their later in the day is. For most accounts, it's 2 o'clock, 1400. But if you do something after 1400, that doesn't even take effect until the following day's close of business. But the big difference between like that mutual fund and TSP and an exchange traded fund is with that ETF, you say sell or buy, you sell or buy as soon as you hit that submit button. And I think that's pretty good. And that's why I like to say that exchange traded funds or mutual funds grown up. Mutual funds were my things back in the day, and now you have the ETFs out there. And then there's buying and selling individually using a lot of different investment platforms. I have some I'm going to talk about in the next slide here. So let's talk about that. I don't know if anybody's buying or selling directly. I like to stay up on mobile apps. I actually have 4 of them on my phone that I actually used for trading, not on a daily basis, but definitely on a weekly basis. I put a couple of them up here, and I have 9 or 10 of them listed here. I'm going to tell you the pro about each one of these real quick for trading. But as I say, do your research. Robinhood. It's one of the best things about Robinhood. And again, this isn't my opinion. This is coming from a couple different articles that I read. So I just took them all. And then I took what they all had to say. So again, this isn't my personal opinion, but they say Robinhood is good for trading stocks for free. Acorns is good for automating investing. I actually have both Stockpile and Acorns. I'll talk about Stockpile in a moment. I actually have Robinhood and Acorn that I use. I like the rounding up process with Acorns. Stash is another mobile app, which is good for beginning investors. Betterment, there it is. Betterment has really low cost and they're really tax efficient. Wealthfront has really low maintenance fees and it's good out there. Stockpile, this is one of my favorites, not to influence you. Stockpile is good for fractional shares. If you look in the business news, Amazon stock hit an all-time high. I think it was yesterday. Amazon stock is trading at about $2,000 a share. I don't know about many of you, but not many of us have $2,000 sitting around where we can go and buy one share of Amazon stock. But wouldn't it be nice to be able to say that, or just to have that warm, touchy feeling saying, yeah, I own some of Amazon stock. With Stockpile, you can go out and you can buy $25 or $50 or $100 worth of Amazon stock, and that's called a fractional share. And that's why I like it. I actually recently became a grandfather, and I opened up an account for my granddaughter. When I buy, I have money transferred into her account, and if I buy $100 worth of something, I buy her $25 worth of something, setting her up hopefully for life, for adulthood.
Congrats.
For her.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a wonderful thing. I thought having kids was wonderful, but payback is having grandkids. So Stockpile, TD Ameritrade, they have a great trading platform out there. ML Finance is good for flexibility. E-Trade has, they say, the best stock selection out there. When you think, and I'll go back to this Stockpile app that I use. Stockpile has I'm just going to say a couple hundred stocks that you can purchase. Where you go at the E-Trade, they have, as they say, the best stock selection out there. And you'll find when you go to these different apps out there, if you want to do investing on your own right now, $25, $50 at a pop, you might want to buy shares of stock in something. And it's like through Robinhood, it's like, wait, I can't find this. But then you can go to Acorns or Wealthfront or Stockpile and you can find the stock. And Ally is good for active investors, is what they say. I will tell you this, I didn't bring up Fidelity, but Fidelity just is realizing how viable Stockpile is with the fractional shares. So Fidelity, if you pay attention, if you see advertisements out, various sources, Fidelity is now advertising that you can buy fractional shares through them. And again, Fidelity brings that big name with them. So, but those are some of the apps out there. If you want to do it on your own, and again, while you're in school right now, if you're not really working, taking advantage of the of going to school. Hopefully, you're using the GI Bill or the Forever GI Bill, and getting that education. And you had some money stashed away, and you can survive now. But if you want to do a little bit now. You can use some of these some of these apps out there to get started, if you want to do that. So that's those. So let me keep moving on here. I have no idea what time it is. This is the downfall of not having a clock or anything present. This should be the last slide.
3:32, Bob. They want to do a question and answer afterwards as well. Oh,
sure. Well, let me just talk for 2 minutes, and then we'll open it up to everything. First off, at the bottom of the slide, you see my personal email. That 888 number is Navy Mutual's number, and it's our direct number only to an education and or VSO. So it's if you have any kind of questions with finances, or VA type questions, we have someone on staff that she answers that phone. She is a VSO, and she works with us in education, and she can answer the question. If she doesn't know the answer to it, she will either forward the number, try to get a hold of myself or Ron or one of the other education individuals, or get an email, send us an email and ask us to call you all back. So there's our 888 number. There's our generic email, education@Navy Mutual. And there's my personal email that you're welcome to have. And of course, A couple of you have I have responded back to a couple of you in an email, and my signature has my cell phone on it. So just know that you are, for those of you who have my email, that I sent someone an email earlier today, and my cell phone is on there. You have my permission to give out my cell phone number, where if somebody wants to call me or text me, you're welcome to do that. I have nothing to sell you. I have nothing to sell you. I can just give you a wealth of, I can share my knowledge, and whatever you're looking for. I have a wealth of resources at my fingertips also. But let me go back to finishing this up, and then we'll open it up. I said this a couple different times, a couple different ways. Diversification, look at all different options. Keep your TSP account, understand what your funds, where your money's at in TSP, and then look at where you're going to start investing money at. Also, look at the fees, look at where you can invest at. Understand the difference between traditional, tax deferred, and Roth. And communication is key. I bring that up because, one, I want you to be able to communicate with either TSP if you have questions, or if you go to work and you have a 401k through the principal or SunTrust or whoever it's with. They have dedicated people that part of your expense fees that you're being charged every month goes to having people available for you to contact them to ask questions. So if you have questions, I know the internet is great for, typing in the search bar, what's the NASDAQ, but you can also call and talk to somebody and ask them questions if it's, through that 401k or what other investment platforms you're using. The other thing with the communication is if you have a significant other, communication is key between the two of you to understand, long range, short range, and then long range goals. I'd be glad to forward to my contact there at Fordham this couples quiz on finances. It's a wonderful quiz. I have two daughters. One obviously made me the grandfather. She just got married. My other daughter just graduated from Belmont University, and she's working in Nashville. And she's got a boyfriend, serious boyfriend. So I sent them both this quiz and said, okay, this is something I want you to sit and talk to now your husband and now your serious boyfriend about money. And all it does is I'm not going to say it's an argument starter. I hope it's not, but it's just one of those things where you can just talk about finances and how you look at finances, because that is, finances is the number one cause of divorce here for us in the United States. So it's better to, bridge that, cover that now. So communication is key with your significant other. And then do some research, like I said, on all the different funds. And again, diversify is key. That's just not putting all your eggs in one basket. So I hope you guys learned something. I will open this up to question and answers, whatever else you got.
Going back to TSP, would you give any advice for active duty members? Like I'm currently still active duty, and I was talking to Ronald about it. I'm currently in the Roth instead of the traditional. I know that's probably more beneficial.
Yeah, it is. And here's why. My advice to you, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
28.
28?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the deal. 28 years of age. So you're not going to touch this money at least for 31 more years. Okay. Let's just assume you retire at 60. Do you know, oddly enough, there's 43,000 millionaires inside of TSP. There's over 43,000 accounts that have over $1 million in it. TSP looked at all these accounts. They took out all the accounts that people rolled money into it. Like I talked about what you guys are eligible to do, what I'm eligible to do with my TSP account after you get out of the service. And they looked at the current federal employees that are millionaires only because of working for the federal government. They rolled no money into it. There's a little over 23,000 bona fide $1 million 401k or TSP accounts inside TSP. And they looked at, well, how did they become a millionaire in TSP working for the federal government? Okay. And obviously a couple things go almost that don't need to be said, but I'm going to say them. Number one is every year they maxed out or closely maxed out how much they contributed every year with the IRS maximum. Okay. So in return, they took advantage of that 5% match. Number two, they've been working for the federal government for a long time. So you got time, and I'm taking advantage of the maxing out or close to maxing out every year on how much the IRS says they can put into it. And so if you look at that, that's a pretty good start. But then TSP said, wait a second, how do you become a millionaire? And they looked at where they invested their money at. And here's the answer to your question. I'm sorry it took me a little ways to get there. More than 90% of those 23,000 accounts, they had one of two different investment strategies. One was a 65-35% split between the C fund and the S fund. And the other one was a 60-30-10 split between the C, the S, and the I fund. So if you want to learn anything, what you take out of that is you're really young. I know the market's down right now, but time is on your side, and stocks is the CDS and the I fund is if you like the I fund. CDS and the I fund is where you should be.
I'm the C and the S, and I just recently adjusted my IFT because of everything going on in the stock market. I'm 100% in the S for the CA for future money.
Okay.
But, my other question would be to better diversify, like you were talking about. Would you recommend getting an IRA, or is it kind of just repetitive?
I'm not going to, I can't give out recommendations, but if I'm going to answer you in a different way, I would say yes. I don't know if you want to commit to an IRA, or if you want to do something or consider something along the line like an ETF or a mutual fund along with your an IRA. And the only reason I say that is at 28, if you open up that IRA, then you have to know that you're making that commitment to not touch that money for another 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's the only reason I'm saying, I'm giving you, think about, short-term and long-term.
Are there any IRAs out there that are more beneficial for active duty?
Like
that you know?
I can't make recommendations, but I would tell you to go out, like I mentioned before, to go after Fidelity, go after Vanguard. For fee purposes, those are the two places to go look for. And then again, since you're in the C fund and the S fund, I would tell you to look for other funds, like find you a fund, index fund that mimics the, say the NASDAQ, or something maybe a little bit different than that, but find you something that's not the S&P 500. A lot of people, and the reason I say that is a lot of people go to, and again, I get nothing out of any of these. A lot of people go to USAA or Vanguard, and they open up the Admiral Fund for the S&P 500, and it's like, okay, and you got money in the C fund, which is the S&P 500, you put money over here in the S&P 500, you're not being that diversified. So that's, I would tell you to look at other funds.
And then my last question, and you didn't touch on it, and I know it wasn't for this topic, but I looked up, it was the first thing I saw when I went to your website on Made Mutual, whole life insurance and different insurances. Do you think maybe we can get you to come back and talk about insurances?
Absolutely. And I made this, and thank you for asking. Thank you for going to our website too. I am a strong whole life fan. I mentioned I have my granddaughter. I just bought my granddaughter a $500,000 whole life insurance policy. And she's only 1 year of age. Now she's 2, but I am a staunch supporter of whole life insurance. I'd be glad to come back if we can set it up with Mr. Butler. And others, I'd be glad to come back and talk about that and other vehicles also. I wouldn't stick this strictly more towards TSP, IRAs, and then a couple of the doing it on your own kind of things, mutual funds and all. But I'd be glad to come back. So,
thank you. I appreciate it. Wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
Bob, I just want to make sure that we get some of these questions on videos for when we post it.
Okay. Let me see if I can get out of this so I can't even see questions. Right. Can I stop sharing my screen and maybe see them?
I'll just read them out so that when we post them, we can people can just view it. So okay. the next question, Ronald has answered some of these, but like I said, I just want to get on video. How do veterans check if we still have an active TSP account? I.e., any veteran who doesn't remember how they left the TSP account once exiting the military?
Oh, that's a great question. And the first thing I would tell you to do is call the TSP Thrift line. Call the TSP Thrift line. They've gotten a lot better at not having to mail you stuff and everything else at your last address and everything else like that, but to get into. But the first step you got to do is call the TSP Thrift line, and they can help you reset your password, and then you can go out to your account and see what you have and whatnot.
And then just reading through the chat here.
Okay.
If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, because I don't know what I did to my screen. You're probably looking at my last slide. I don't know what I did here on Zoom to.
Nope, we're just seeing you.
Okay.
If you didn't contribute more than $200 while on active duty, does this TSP account shut down?
It's supposed to. It's supposed to after TSP. If you're already out, when you go into your whatever service you're in, your admin office, and you start the separation or retirement process, when you transfer out, TSP gets that same RE code that you get on your DD-214. TSP gets that so they know that you're no longer a current federal employee for that retirement plan, which then would stop you from being able to put in for a loan or anything else like that. But if you have less than $200, they're supposed to close your account.
Okay. And then
if you don't know if they did that, they might have kept your money because you didn't even have that much in there. TSP has a bar limit amount that if you have less than a certain amount of money in it, they just close the account and keep the money.
And then another question. Now you said there's a max contribution in that you can put in a year for the IRA.
Yes.
Does that max contribution include the rollovers that you do?
No. This is no. If you do rollovers, that's considered one source of income or source of money, and then how much you can put into it this year from your income this year is at $6,000.
Okay. And then I think that was all the questions that I saw. If anyone else has anything that I missed, please just unmute your mic and ask it.
Yeah, I got one for you. I was curious about, I know you mentioned about maybe coming back to talk about the insurance portion that John brought up. What about coming in to talk about VA home loans? I'm not sure if that's your area as well.
I'm not as keen as I'd like to be on VA home loans, but I can tell you what I can do. I can work with somebody and get a lot more information on it, and probably have them on standby. Most of my knowledge I've learned because I've used a VA home loan so many times over the course of my lifetime so far. But I can get a little bit more knowledge on that. So I'm not talking more from personal experience, but I can come well versed in that if that's what you want. And then again, I will have, when I come and I do this and I do that portion, I will have a contact that if I can't answer the question, I'll give you a contact to call someone that'll give you that answer.
Yeah,
who I'll go to for all. Okay.
All right.
And again, when we're talking about
anything else? All right, Bob, do you have any last minute things you want to say?
Hey, I'm sorry. I got one question.
Yes, sir.
I was just referring back to the VA loan. Like, would you be able to like work with an individual person, like throughout like the application process?
That I can't do. Okay. That I can't. Unfortunately, I can't. I am just an educator. I can't do anything. The only thing I can do one-on-one is sit down with you and just talk to you about like your personal finances or wherever you're at there, and we can look and see where you're at, figure out where you want to get to, and then we can figure out how we can get you there. But with that no. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have anything else to say, Bob?
No, sir. I'm good. I'm all talked out.
All right. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Bob and Ronald, for coming in and putting this on for us. We really do appreciate it. for anyone else who's watching, if you have any further questions or concerns moving forward after this session, you can email the student veterans at Fordham. Our email address is veterans@fordham.edu, and we would be more than happy to answer those questions or get you in touch with Bob or Ronald and his team to get your answers to all your questions. Thanks for joining us. Bob, once again, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Semper Fi, and thank you.